Let's talk about masculinity, his emotional wiring, that is, his nature, the biological foundations of who he is, how he was shaped, nurture, how he grew from a boy to a man. There's real wonder in a man, not because he's flawless, but because he has an amazingly intricate design. Let's dive in. Before considering how a man is shaped by experience, it's important to understand how he is designed. His masculine perspective does not begin in culture, it begins with his biology. Researchers have found evidence that male infants are more emotionally expressive than female infants from birth through at least the first 6 to 12 months of life. Infant boys tend to cry more frequently and intensely, coo and smile more often, and experience more rapid fluctuations in emotional states than girls. They're especially sensitive to their mother's emotional state. In other words, a man doesn't grow into emotional intensity, he comes into the world with it already in place. However, by approximately 2 years of age, a noticeable reversal begins to occur in verbal expression. And by 6 years of age, differences in facial expression become evident as well. In other words, his emotional intensity does not disappear, its outward expression changes. Boys also appear to demonstrate a natural tendency to express emotion more through action than through verbal processing. Between the ages of 4 and 6, interestingly, around the time formal schooling begins, many boys show an increasing ability to avoid overt emotional responses. His capacity to feel does not diminish, his visible display does. He experiences empathy deeply. Even as a boy, he's highly likely to step in to defend or encourage someone who's struggling. What changes over time is not his experience of emotion, but his expression of emotion. He tends more and more to take action, and if he feels trapped, he'll pull back to regroup. It's important to recognize that external composure does not equal internal calm. This difference alone accounts for much marital confusion. A woman may assume that because he's not talking, he's not feeling. In reality, he may be feeling intensely and managing it silently. But emotional wiring is only part of the picture. A man is also physically designed for strength and directed action. Compared to an average woman, an average man has greater upper body strength, naturally higher levels of testosterone, and a nervous system that responds quickly to challenge. Testosterone influences confidence, risk tolerance, and the drive to compete, build, and conquer obstacles. This doesn't make him superior to a woman, it makes him different. Whereas a woman's nervous system is naturally attuned to relational nuance and multi layered awareness, a man's nervous system tends toward focused engagement. He tends to concentrate deeply on one thing at a time. When engaged in a task, he may block out peripheral stimuli, not because they're unimportant, but because his nervous system is designed for singular focus. That's why he may not hear his name the first time it's spoken. That's why he may not respond immediately during a task. That's why he may appear unavailable when he's simply absorbed, even if the object of his focus is the television or his phone. His focus is not rejection, it's orientation. This same focused wiring allows him to solve complex problems, work persistently toward a goal, protect under pressure, stay steady in crisis. However, it can also make rapid shifts from task focus to relationship focus a bit clunky. Whereas a woman naturally and frequently transitions between logic and emotion, he's not likely to make that switch as quickly. His system doesn't pivot as fluidly between relational and task-oriented modes. Understanding this difference prevents unnecessary misinterpretation. Okay, a man's nature includes emotional intensity beneath the surface, physical strength and risk tolerance, a drive toward action and impact, and a deep, singular focus. None of these traits are flaws. They're part of the wonder of a man. When he knows this about himself, he better understands his own responses. And when she knows this about him, she stops personalizing his seeming inattention to her, his silence, or his intensity. Now, nature is not the whole story, but it is the foundation. Nature lays the foundation, nurture gives it direction. A boy begins life with emotional intensity and physical strength, and he must learn how to manage both as he becomes a man. Across cultures and centuries, fathers and older men have understood this instinctively. Raw male strength, both physical and emotional, must be controlled and directed. Without discipline, strength becomes aggression. Sensitivity becomes volatility. So as a boy, he's taught self-control. He's taught to use his strength appropriately. He's taught to be kind to others and never to hit a girl. This training begins when he's a toddler on the playground. When he's knocked down, he's told, "Get up." When he's hurt, he's told that he'll be fine. When he gets emotional, he's told not to cry. When delivered with his well-being in mind, these messages are not dismissive. They're formative. He learns that gentleness is controlled strength, not weakness. He learns that composure is power. He learns that emotion must be controlled. Over time, he develops the ability to manage his emotions privately. He's not taught that emotions are bad. He's taught that emotions must be mastered. By the time he becomes a man, he's internalized a male perspective on what it means to be a healthy human being. Emotions are real and they require self-discipline. This perspective contrasts sharply with the emotional training a woman receives. Whereas she's been encouraged to process emotions through conversation and connection, he's been trained to regulate his emotions through containment and control. Neither approach is superior, but they are very different. And difference, when misunderstood, creates friction. Because he was not trained to talk about emotions within relationship, he may feel ill-equipped to handle intimate connection and conflict with his wife, who wants to talk about all of it and may feel offended when he doesn't. One researcher labeled this emotional experience with a highly descriptive term: male relational dread. When things aren't going well, a man's experience with his wife may be characterized by a sense of inevitable, never-ending disaster and an expectation of immense and irreparable damage. Relational dread surfaces and grows each time he is confronted with an emotional intensity he's not yet learned how to navigate, especially when he feels responsible for fixing a problem he doesn't understand. In those emotionally charged moments, he may feel unsafe, guilty, incompetent, or even ashamed because he doesn't know what she expects from him. If she tries to explain or pushes him to talk, his overwhelm may cause him to withdraw, strike out, tune out, change the subject, joke, make nice, or fall silent in an effort to regain emotional control. The bottom line: nature gives him physical strength and emotional intensity. Nurture teaches him discipline and self-control. And thus he arrives in adulthood. Both nature and nurture have played a role in how he sees himself, his wife, his world, and his purpose in life.